Alrighty, so this is going to be going over Staff Mirage slash Boon Mirage, depending on how you're playing it. At this point, there is a small branch, I think, between DPS and Staff Mirage, and I'll explain all of that a little bit here in a sec. Not enough to really worry about your gear or anything like that, but definitely something to take into consideration. So, if you watched or were at my previous opening session, you will know that we have to take 0 boon duration to upkeep alac. Overall, that has not changed with this recent patch. The recent patch brought our alac on ambushes from 3 seconds to 2.5 with the chaos trait. And assuming you have regen, you still do not need to take boon duration. But you need to play the class perfectly. So getting that out of the way, most people are not going to do that. That's not realistic for a raid situation, so you probably will have to take some boon duration. The other nerf was to our auto attacks, specifically the ones that our clones do. They dropped their confusion and torment time from 5 seconds to 2 seconds. This is kind of an artificial nerf in a way because we spend 90% of our time ambushing anyway, not auto attacking. So it's a very weird nerf in terms of trying to tone us down to make axe better. I don't think it really accomplished that. I can definitely feel the nerf in high confusion fights where my numbers were getting really high. On SH, it's definitely a bit more of a struggle to hit 50k in a pug run versus before it being the norm. But it is still possible. So overall, this class was left untouched. If you were worried about that beforehand, keep in mind that that is vastly irrelevant to us. This class is very, very good still, borderline broken still. And as such, I'm going to post a small disclaimer ahead of time that everything I'm saying may change in the future with future nerfs if they come about. Just keep that in mind. What I'm saying now may not be the truth in the future. For now, though, I'm going to explain Staff Mirage and how it is played, its gear, its traits, all that lovely stuff. So we'll go ahead and start with its gear. If you have an Axe Mirage, then you will have a grand old easy time switching over to alac because our gear vastly remains the same. We'll be taking full Viper's gear all the way down the board on everything. It doesn't matter where, it's all Vipers. We'll be using Nightmare runes. This is important because we have 3 conditions that we're spitting out relatively often, so getting all of those condition capped is very important, and Nightmare runes does that the best. And then for our weapon, we will be using bursting and energy. We have 2 staffs, of course, because we need 2 to make energy work. Energy gives us 50% more endurance when we weapon swap, so it is very important that we have 2 weapons, both with bursting and with energy. And last but not least, you're almost going to go full expertise infusions if you have infusions. Pretty much everything. I have a single Condi damage here because I am at 100% Condi duration, which is what expertise is, right? And if I had more slots on my rings, I would throw in a bit more. I could put 3 more Condi damages in here if I wanted. But that is depending on the food you're using as well and what you're doing, of course. Right now I have concentration food on, which is what still gives me 100% boon duration with 70% expertise. That means that from now on, if I'm going full damage, I will be using condition damage food, high condition damage foods, and low expertise food, which is the meat instead of the veggie. So something to keep in mind if you are planning on switching into how I am taking this recent patch and its boon duration nerf into account. That being said, there is some minor changes on things you can adapt for here, and I'll explain that more in a bit, but keep in mind that bursting sigil may not be a guarantee. It kind of depends on what you're wanting to do, and depends how safe you feel with your alacrity, which means you may need 4 weapons instead of 2, but I'll go more into that a little bit later. That's about it for the gear. Moving on to the traits, we have Chaos, Dueling, and Mirage, of course, Mirage. So Chaos is the one that got really heavily buffed on May 11th, and they did not touch it on this patch, so it remains the same, and we continue to take it because it is very powerful. First off, we gain regen when we're hit below a threshold. This is nice because our later traits require us to have regeneration to be active, so any free regen is nice for us. keep in mind, of course, most raids have a healer who will give you regen. So a lot of this times, this trait and other traits that I'll be pointing out are kind of useless if those people are giving you regen. But if your regen isn't guaranteed, this is nice. We don't really have a good pick on the first tree, so we take Method of Madness, which means that if you are using your skill on cooldown, every other use of it will drop a lesser Chaos Storm, which is a bit of an RNG. It dazes and it has the chance to poison the target for a little bit more damage. Overall, it's pretty useless. Some free Aegis is nice as well, some free Resolution. But in terms of your DPS and your alacrity, it's pretty much non-consequential. Illusionary Membrane, we get more damage and we take less damage for free, but of course we need to have regeneration, otherwise this is not active. So again, regen is very important to this build. Chaotic Potency, this is of course the staff choice because it reduces the cooldown of our staff as well as giving us bonus condition damage when we're using a staff. So we get 240 condition damage from that, very nice boost. Chaotic Persistence, this again requires us to have regeneration. We do not have regeneration, we do not get this buff, and it is 16.66% Condi duration and Boon duration, which is huge. So it's very, very important that you have regen in this build. And last but not least, I use Bounce to Full Disillusion. We're going to be doing a lot of F2 shatters, and when we do those, I give myself vigor as well as some free stability. So this is nice for making sure you have full vigor uptime. If you want to go completely maximum and you know that your vigor uptime is perfect and everything, then you can switch to Chaotic Interruption, which gives us the chance to reduce our cooldowns on our weapon skills. But this is such a niche pick and it's going to see so little value to you that overall it's not really a big deal. Most of the time the only skills that will have off cooldown are 2 and 4, and if it hits 2 it's useless, if it hits 4 it's nice, cool. But when we use it, it has to be on an interrupt, and we don't have much base CC in this kit. We're not going to be pressing 5 for CC, which is one of our CCs, unless we have to CC, of course, right? So that makes it so this trait is almost never used. We're not going to be pressing F3 unless we have to CC. We're not going to be pressing Dami Signet unless we have to CC, and this only works when we're CCing. So it's pretty incredibly minor. It has the chance for a DPS gain, but it's pretty low. So I like to take Bountiful Disillusion just to maximize my vigor uptime and make sure that it feels nice and full. Moving on to dueling, we have our gain vigor when delivering a critical hit. This trait alone gives us 60% uptime on vigor as long as we're critting. So if you manage to get those crits in, it's pretty nice. We don't have crit cap, right? So this is probably more realistically like a 50% uptime, but it's still very nice. Phantasm's Gain Fury. This is a very, very nice trait. Since we're not using pistol like Axe, we don't have to worry about Duelist Discipline. So we take Phantasmal Fury, which links up very, very well with our next trait. Illusions inflict bleed on critical hits. Between this and our Chaos Vortex, you can keep upwards of like 35 bleed, probably averaging around 30 to 32, I'd say. But it's a ridiculous amount of bleed for very little effort. So Blind Dissipation, this makes it so our Shatter 2 inflicts blindness, which will sync up with our next trait. Ineptitude, which makes it so that we apply confusion on blindness. So that syncs really well with this trait, as well as syncing well with your weapon skill, which I'll talk more about in a sec. And last but not least, Gain Fury when you strike an enemy whose health is below the threshold. More Fury is nice, doing more crits is nice and all, but we don't really have a lot of power damage, so this is relatively irrelevant to us. The more important one is that our Phantasmas have Fury so that they can keep bleeding. But more Fury is more damage, so can't complain. And last but not least, the Mirage trait. This one is the most important trait, of course, because this allows us to use our ambush skills. Every time we dodge and every time we pick up a Mirage Mirror, we get to ambush because we get Mirage Cloak. This is incredibly useful, and this is the main reason why we give alac and why we're so powerful. It also lets us use axes, which is another build if you are interested in it. Axe Mirage is a very, very fun build, and also very, very competitive, so that is an option if you want to. But obviously we're using staff in this predicament. Self-deception is going to be our main source of clone generation. This makes it so that if we have a clone on the field and we use the deception skill, of which we have 3, we get another clone just cuz. So it's very nice for clone generation. It makes our lives a lot easier. Nomad's Endurance makes it so when we shatter we get more vigor. The more vigor the better, of course, so that we can keep dodging. Bountiful Desert Distortion, I'm sorry, I was going to say Bountiful Disillusion, I don't know why. Desert Distortion makes it so that when we F4 we do a free ambush, as well as making our clones turn into mirrors. This is very, very, very useful if you feel like you need a little bit more alac, because you don't quite feel comfortable with how your alac uptime is. This is a nice little buffer. If you play Axe Mirage, you're taking the axe trait, but since we don't have axes, it's useless, so we take this. So keep in mind, in the future, if you need a little bit more alac, feel free to press F4. Speed of Sand, this makes it so that we have super speed whenever we have Mirage Cloak, which is during dodges and mirrors, so it's nice to have a little bit of extra boost there. And last but not least, Infinite Horizon. When we get Mirage Cloak, so do our illusions. This is what makes it so that our illusions can cast our ambush skill, and this is where we get the bulk of our damage. It is an insane trait, and I would never swap off of it, ever. That's about it. There's some minor changes you can do if you're worried about regen, like taking Renewing Oasis, but that makes it so that you don't have clone creation, which means now you have to use Phantasm Warlock, which is bad because it's not a DPS gain for us, and stuff like that. But for the most part, this is the tried and true build that I use for pretty much every encounter. There is also some debate on whether you could go illusions for more shatters and get more torment, but overall, getting rid of this bleed and getting rid of all this extra confusion is not worth it in my opinion, so dueling is definitely the way to go. And then going down our skills, our tried and true bread and butter, our auto attack. Winds of Chaos is the auto attack when we don't have Mirage Cloak. It is the non-ambush version. That was what was nerfed. That makes it so that when our auto attacks shoot, they no longer shoot 5 seconds of torment and confusion, they shoot 2 seconds. So the problem is that they're not going to be doing a lot of auto attacking if you play this class right. So it is relatively minor DPS loss for us, and overall not a worry. One thing that a lot of people are confused about is that our auto attacks do apply Fury on bounces. This is very, very inconsistent, and if someone tells you that you're upkeeping Fury as the Staff Mirage, I would tell them, no you're not. It's just way too inconsistent. You're not going to be giving 5-man, 10-man Fury. So don't count on it. If you need Fury because you have a bunch of power classes in your group, make sure that that Fury source is not you. We do give a little bit of Fury on RNG, but it is not enough to upkeep it. As for Chaos Vortex, that is our bread and butter. That is the bulk of our damage. That is our alacrity, and that is our might. That happens every time we dodge, and every time we pick up a mirror, we get to cast a Chaos Vortex, which is this lovely guy. It's beautiful. It shoots a giant purple orb of death, and it gives everyone boons. So very, very nice. One thing to note about this ability, it has a ridiculously long cast time, and you can interrupt it by literally doing anything except for instant attacks like Jaunt or Staff 4. These two are instant attacks. If you do anything else while that cast bar is out, it will not finish. If I cast a mirror, didn't work. If I cast a heal, didn't work. If I Staff 2, didn't work. Anything. It all interrupts it. So you need to be very, very, very careful not to interrupt your cast when you're ambushing, because if you do, you're not giving alac, you're not giving might, and you're not doing a ton of damage, because that is our biggest damage boost. So keep that in mind. Phase Retreat, this does 0 damage, and it also launches us backwards, so please be careful with it when it comes to mobility, but this is our main source of 0 clone generation, because, like I said earlier, self-deception makes it so we create a clone when we have 0 clones, but if we, when we have at least 1 clone on the field, I'm sorry, but if we have 0 clones, this will do nothing. So to get that initial clone, we use Staff 2. Do not use this on cooldown. It does 0 damage. It can get you killed because it launches you backwards. This is simply for making us get our first clone when we're at 0 clones. So keep that in mind. Staff 3, this is going to be used in our opener mainly. After that, it is very, very niche. It does power damage, and we are a condition class. So in terms of damage, it's pretty useless. But the one bonus that it does have is that it drops 12 stacks of vulnerability on the boss for about 8 seconds once they're all out there. 7 or 8 seconds. So if you need Vuln, feel free to press this. Having 12 extra stacks of Vuln, if you didn't have it before, is definitely going to be a bigger DPS increase than not pressing this. So keep that in mind. There may be niche cases where you're stacking Staff Mirages or something, and you may need to press this at certain intervals to make sure that the boss has Vuln. But besides that, we are only using this on our opener, and then we never press it again. So if you are a Mirage or a Chrono player, you may have taken Signet of the Ether in the past to reset your Phantasms and cast them again. This is irrelevant to us. We press this once in our rotation, and then it doesn't exist. Chaos Armor, this is nice because it blinds and it applies confusion, and because it blinds, it applies even more confusion because of our trait Ineptitude, right? So this is an instant cast. It doesn't interrupt anything you're doing, which means you should be pressing this on cooldown. There is no reason ever to not press this button unless the boss is out of range, because it is a 240 radius, so you do have to be next to the boss. But if you are next to the boss and this is off cooldown, just press it. It's free damage. It's kind of that simple. The only time you wouldn't do that is if you're too far away, or if you want to be specific, it does apply confusion, right? So if you know the boss isn't doing anything and you know they're about to do something later, then you would want to delay it, because confusion only does big damage when the boss does something, right? When the boss attacks. So if the boss isn't doing anything, then don't press this quite yet and wait for the boss to do something again. That's the only time you're not going to press this, outside of being out of range. And last but not least, for our weapon skills, Chaos Storm, this is a CC button. It has a small bit of power damage, and it has the RNG chance to apply poison, which means that this is incredibly low and inconsistent damage. We press this for CC. It has that 1 second daze. It's 100 break bar damage. Press it when there's CC. Do not be afraid to. I could see some niche cases of this being used for stacking if you have pistol users like Condi Chronos or something because of the ethereal field. Outside of that, this is never going to be used in terms of your own DPS. Moving on, our heal skill is False Oasis. This may be a change if you've been playing Mesmer a lot in the past, because every other Mesmer build uses Signet of Ether. We use False Oasis to get another mirror, which, as I said earlier, that's proccing Method of Madness from our traits, and it drops a mirror. We pick that mirror up, we get another ambush, another beautiful purple orb to do big damage with. So that is another tool for another ambush, which is more might, more damage, more alacrity. Signet of Dami and Signet of Midnight, these are both used to simply increase our damage. It's more Condi damage, it's more expertise, which helps us to Condi duration crit cap, or I'm sorry, Condi duration cap. You don't press these when in terms of DPS, especially Midnight. Midnight should never ever be pressed. Dami Signet you can press if you need to CC because it does 300 break bar damage, but that is a kind of an emergency tool because you are going to be losing damage for the next 45 seconds since you're not having that extra condition damage. But it's better to press this than it is to wipe, so don't be afraid to press this if you need more CC. Crystal Sands is going to be our only utility that we will be using. You can use this off cooldown. It produces a 6-sided attack on the boss, and they get launched together and they create a mirror, which is on the boss. I have ground target right now, so you can't really see it. Right? But it launches that and it leaves a mirror behind, which is, of course, another ambush, as well as applying confusion and some power damage. So this is a very good skill. It's free damage, it's another ambush, it's basically a better dodge. So you should be using that on cooldown. And last but not least, Jaunt. Jaunt is another deception skill and will be another source of clone production. Every time we shatter, we lose our clones, so we're gonna F2 to get that shatter, to get that first clone, and then we're gonna use deception skills to get the other clones back. If you're gonna overcap on Jaunt, feel free to use it. With the rotation I will be explaining here in a moment, you do overcap Jaunt. You don't need to save them for any reason. So every Jaunt that overcaps is wasted confusion, since they do apply confusion, since they are instant and they do not interrupt anything else you're doing. Do not let this overcap. If you see it about to hit 3 again, just use another one and make sure that you're not losing that confusion damage. And then finally our shatters. F1 is power damage. For the most part, it is completely useless. We will never use this, so don't worry about it. F2 is our big bread and butter. It blinds, it applies confusion, and it applies even more confusion because it blinds. This is all because of our traits in the dueling tree, and this should be used on cooldown. It is a huge source of confusion for us, and is going to be a large source of our burst confusion when you know that the boss is doing something. So keep that in mind. This is a huge DPS gain and should always be used. In terms of DPS, this is the only one we are going to be used. Like I said, we're not using F1, so F2 will be the one that's used all the time. F3 is CC, and if you need CC, you should be using this, of course. It will shatter your clones, but it does 400 break bar damage, which is our biggest break bar damage button. So do not be afraid to use this button if you need to break the boss. One small note is that it's 100 break bar damage per clone. So if you have 0 clones, this is only going to be doing 100 break bar damage because it only shatters on you. But if you have 3 clones, 400 break bar damage is nice and chunky. And last but not least, distortion. This is a good panic button if you feel like you're about to die. This is a good source of extra ambushes if you feel like you need more alac. And it does have some niche abilities where distortion can help you do weird things, like on Sloth, you can eat coconuts by pressing this, and different things like that, as well as giving us more regen uptime if you're worried about that. But mainly this is going to be used as a alac source. If we have our clones on the field and we press F4, they turn into mirrors. That's a lot of mirrors. That's 4 mirrors right there. One was because of crystal sands, but that's still a lot of mirrors. That's a lot of alac sitting over there. So if you need more alac, feel free to press that F4 button and go around and start collecting these mirrors so you can get lots and lots of alac out. It's very nice to make sure that you have a decent cushion on your alac if you are solo alac. Keep in mind it does shatter your illusions, right? So you need to quickly get back up to 3 clones because goal number 1 of every Mirage on the planet is to stay at 3 clones. If you're not at 3 clones, you're doing it wrong. So your goal is to always stay at 3 clones. So you can't really press F4 unless you precast a Phantasm or if you have Staff 2 ready, which I will sometimes do with Phantasm if I am feeling like I'm going to press F4 because Sloth or because I need more alac. I'll cast a Phantasm. These guys chill for a while and then they turn into clones when they're done, right? So I shatter, they turn into clones, and I can do another skill to get 3 clones back instantly. So keep that in mind. That's also one way to use diversion. If I know that a break bar is about to happen, like on Largos or on SH or something, I will cast 3. Can't really do damage when they have a break bar anyway, right? I'll shatter right before they change, and I will do 1 deception skill to get myself back up to 3. These are very important tactics when it comes to using other shatters, because if you're not at 3 clones and you ambush, you're missing out on extra purple balls, and we all like purple balls. They do a lot of damage, they do a lot of alac, they do a lot of might. The more purple balls we have, the better. One thing to note, you are the only one giving alac and might. Your clones don't do that, they just do extra damage. So don't think that you need 3 clones to do alac. If you're in a panic to get alac and you have 0 clones, you can just do an ambush by yourself and still give out alac. But you are missing out on damage by not having them out. So that is more of an emergency measure or a measure of you don't care. For instance, Doom pre-event. I don't care if I have clones. I'm running around ambushing with 0 clones all the time on Doom pre-event because there's nothing to attack anyway. There's nothing to build clones on except for the skeletons, which I will do, but then they will disappear as soon as the skeletons die. So if there is a time where you're not attacking the boss, feel free to do 0 clone ambushes just to get free ambush and might. Might and alac. But keep in mind that if the boss is up and you don't have 3 clones, you're losing damage. So that all being said, that is just about everything that you have to know about the kit. So now how do we put it into practice, right? One thing to keep in mind is that, like I said in the beginning of this, they did nerf our alac uptime from 3 seconds to 2.5 seconds. That is a 16.66% nerf in our alac uptime, so that's something to keep in mind. If you were struggling with alac before, and we now have this shift of less alac and you are solo alac, then you need to make up that 16.66%. So how do you do that? You can take boon duration food, which I am taking Where's my guild? I'm sorry. I am taking Eggs Benedict. Any type of Eggs Benedict will have concentration and expertise, which is what I have on me right now. I have 100 concentration, 70 expertise, and you can also take Toxic Maintenance Oil. Between both of those, you get about 16% back, which basically makes up for the nerf, right? So if you felt comfortable where you were before, but you weren't quite keeping up 100% alac, then you can just use both of these and you should be fine. If you were at like 97%, just give yourself both of these and you'll be fine. If you feel like you need a bigger cushion, then you can use a concentration sigil on your weapons instead of bursting sigils, which is what I have on my weapons. And that'll give you another 10% cushion, right? But for the most part, you don't need to do that. The Toxic Maintenance Oil, which I think is the best one, but I haven't actually figured out the math. I think that's the best because we have the most power and most condition damage. Those are our highest stats, right? So I'm pretty sure that the Toxic Maintenance Oil will be the best one for us. So that plus the Eggs Benedict will be enough. If you are coming from the past build where you had Koi Cakes and you had 8 infusions of expertise to make sure you hit 100, now that you're switching to 70%, plus 70 expertise, you do need to take extra infusions for expertise. If you're coming from that, if you're that hard of a tryhard, like me. So I have an extra 6 expertise infusions so that I could get Condi duration capped. So you'll need to take that into consideration. I'm doing that so that I can get the extra concentration, which is of course losing me damage, but I'd rather be safe than sorry when it comes to the alac. So that's my little cushion. If you feel like you need more, make sure to use those Toxic Maintenance Oils. If you feel like you need even more, make sure you're using that Sigil of Concentration. You'll be good to go. So going into the build itself, how do we put this into play? Well, first and foremost, for every class is always the opener, right? So our opener is going to be the one time that we are using Phantasmal Warlock, our Staff 3, and then we are going to get 3 clones instantly with Staff 2, Crystal Sands, and Jaunt, and then we're going to do an F2 so that we get that really, really powerful 3-clone F2 pretty much instantly. As soon as we do that, we can do 1 ambush if you feel like it, but keep in mind that this ambush will be a 0 or maybe 2 clone ambush, depending on how slow you are to get your out. But I do that to make sure that I get some alacrity out there. So I do that before the phantasms turn into clones, and then once they turn into clones, you can use False Oasis, and that'll get you pretty much nicely synced with your F2 and your False Oasis, which both have the same cooldown. So you can kind of use these in conjunction. The one thing to keep in mind is that this has a 3.4 second cast, which means that they will desync by 0.75 of a second every time you cast it, right? So every time I go for my next F2, I do delay by 3/4 of a second. But I really like how much these sync, and I like being able to use Crystal Sands on cooldown. So that's what I do. So like I said, the opener is going to be 3 into 2 into Crystal Sands into Jaunt. That gets us instantly at 3 clones. So then we press F2 so that we can get that 3-clone shatter. Our phantasms will turn into clones, and we can do a False Oasis to get back up to 3 instantly again. 4 should also be used, but like I said in the beginning, 4 is always used. It's used off cooldown, so just use it whenever. So just to show it in a bit of a slower fashion, I have 3, I 2, I Sands, and I Jaunt. I'm up to 3. I Shatter. The turn into clones. I do a False Oasis. I'm back up to 3. And then I can go along my merry way. So that's pretty much the opener in a nutshell. We're getting a new build. Cool. This opener will also give you 2 mirrors with the Crystal Sands and the False Oasis. But you are having to get your endurance down, which is going to be our main resource. So you can kind of leave those mirrors on the field, because they stay there for 15 seconds, and get some endurance down, try and get a weapon swap in, and then you can start picking up those mirrors so that you're not wasting any of your resources, because your dodges are your main resource on Mirage. If you're not, if you're overcapped on endurance, or if you're not weapon swapping off cooldown, you're losing endurance, which is losing us ambushes, it's losing us alac, it's losing us damage, it's losing us everything. So that's something to keep in mind. you don't have to pick up the mirrors right away because your endurance is your biggest resource. So after the opener, which I'll explain one more time real quick, 3, 2, jaunt, get that first ambush, shatter, they turn into clones, I do another thing, and we go along our merry way. From here on out, we're doing resource management. You don't have to pick up those mirrors, you can space them out and such. So after that, this comes down to a priority list, basically, which is, if you're coming from Axe Mirage, very, very similar. It feels the same. Is there a reason you don't staff ambush before shatter? So you can staff, if I'm solo alac, I will staff ambush on my way in, just to get everyone going.
I mean, between after the staff, when you have 3 clones, before you...
Right here?
Yeah, you can get one off, I think, before you shatter. I don't know if it's better or worse, though.
I do it with sands, which was why I was saying do one ambush. I don't do it before the shatter. You're right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you get one off before, I don't know if it's better, but you can fit it.
It would make sense, actually, now that I think about it, because it gives you a 3-clone ambush instead of... But if you don't delay, I don't think it's going to matter, actually, because the problem, which is something else that I'll mention here real quick, whenever you do your ambush, you have quickness, right? But your guys don't. Which means that, for anyone that doesn't know, if you dodge too much, they won't cast their abilities. You have to let them finish, since we have quickness and they don't. So you can't do 2 dodges in a row. If you do 2 dodges in a row, they're not going to cast. And I missed 3 orbs. So if I try that opener, give me more energy, please. I missed the F2, but I think you do have enough time.
I think you do as well, but I don't know if it's... There may be something else wrong with it, but yeah, just a thought.
Yep, that works. Okay, so I'm shifting my opener in the future. Thank you so much for that. We're going to shift our first ambush instead of after the shatter to before the shatter. That makes the window even tighter. So that's something to keep in mind if you're learning this. You have to make sure that you're watching your buddies, because as soon as they finish their launch, you have to shatter. If you do it too late, your phantasms are going to turn into clones before the shatter goes off, which means that you now are sitting at 0 clones and you have nothing to do. But no, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's something that I am going to incorporate in the future myself. So just to go over that one more time, since I am shifting on the fly here myself, we're going to 3 into 2. Of course, we're pressing 4 off cooldown. That's negligible. And then we crystal sands into jaunt, and then we will instantly do an ambush. And as soon as they finish their cast, we're going to go ahead and do that F2. And then after that F2, they should turn into clones, and we can get our false oasis out for that last one. So 3, 2, jaunt, we ambush right away. As soon as they spit it, we shatter them. And then we can go ahead and get our 3 boys back and go into our way, because the phantasms turn into clones. It's a pretty tight window from what I can tell. Just obviously I haven't tested it much, but if you're not used to that combo, I would definitely work on keeping an eye on your clones to make sure that they launch that ambush attack. If they do not launch that ambush attack and you shatter before then honestly you did the same opener I've been doing, because remember, they don't have quickness. I can't stress that enough. Never dodge twice in a row. It is very bad. And don't weapon swap either. You can also interrupt them with that, right? If I do this, I launch and I weapon swap. Actually, that doesn't interrupt them. It interrupts them on axe, but apparently not here. So just don't dodge twice in a row. It's bad for you. It's bad for your health. It's bad for their health. After that, this becomes a priority system, a management game. Our endurance is our most important thing to manage. If this is full, we are losing ambushes. If this is at 50% or more and we have a weapon swap, we are losing ambushes. So this means it's very important to do your best to keep this low, right? If it's above this and I swap, I just lost that extra bit of ambush. So keep that in mind. If your weapon swap is about to come off cooldown, you should do an ambush to get below 50%. If it's about to get to full, you should do an ambush to not let it get to full. It's very important that this meter never completely hits full. And then, of course, we have our mirrors, which is going to be the other source of our ambushes. We need to tie all of this together. Crystal Sand should be used on cooldown, but keep in mind that if you use a dodge and then you touch the mirror, you lost that mirror, which means that this should be placed in a position where you can get to it, but not will instantly touch it, because like I'm full endurance. Oh no, I need to get rid of my endurance. I drop a Crystal Sands and then I do a dodge and I touch the mirror. I lost that mirror. So it's very important that these are placed in a position where it won't hit you, but it will still hit the boss, but you can still get it, which is why sometimes I use snap to target, because then it's just right in front of me, right? So it drops right in front of me, I do my ambush, and then I go ahead and touch it later, whenever the heck I need it. It's 15 seconds, there's no rush. Just make sure you grab it before it disappears and you're good. Like I said earlier, jaunt should never be overcapping, so that is another priority. If you see this about to hit 3, just use one real quick. Don't let it overcap. I think I just crashed. Nope, never mind. I just froze for a second. Don't let that overcap. It's free confusion. It's a little bit of free power damage. It's free damage all around. And then last but not least, our F2. Once we finish our opener, I basically just sync this with False Oasis and a single jaunt. Like I said, this aftercast, this cast time makes it so this desyncs a little bit. So after that first initial F2, I do have some downtime here. I did that wrong. After the first one, I cast that, right? And then I have a little bit of downtime where this is at 19, that's at 20, right? They're very slightly desynced. So when F2 comes off cooldown, I delay just a little bit so that I know that this is going to come off cooldown. And then I combine them with Staff 2. So 5, 4, I don't have alac. That's a shame. Someone's not doing their job. There we go. So that comes off cooldown, that comes off cooldown, and then I can use them together. So what I do is I shatter, and then as soon as you're done shattering, you're going to do Staff 2 to instantly get that first clone back. If you come from Axe Mirage, this is different, because Axe Mirage's shatter in the middle of their Axe 2 because of the animation. Our Staff 2 does not have an animation. So it is very, very important that you shatter first. And if you're coming from Axe Mirage, you're very good at pressing 2 and then shattering, which is a habit that I had to break myself. So we do that F2, then we Staff 2, and then we can jaunt in with False Oasis. I jaunt first. I used to use Crystal Sands and jaunt at the same time, but because of False Oasis's mirror, I think it's safer to just jaunt in real quick and then cast a False Oasis. And then if you are not full on endurance, what I like to do is very, very quickly toss an ambush, and then I sit here and I let myself auto pick up the next mirror, because False Oasis does drop us an extra mirror, right? And those are our main resources. Using these guys on cooldown, right? Don't let jaunt overcap, use sands on cooldown, manage our dodges, and use our F2, which should always be combined with False Oasis and a single jaunt. So try and save yourself one jaunt for this combo. The moment that sucker's back up, we do it all over again, right? And we're good to go. And last but not least, like I was saying earlier, since these guys don't have quickness, it is very, very important that we are delaying our next attack. So what I like to do is I do 2 auto attacks in between every ambush. We have a large source of ambushes between our mirrors, between our dodges, but we still have to let these guys do their thing, otherwise we're missing out a lot of damage. So I count 2 auto attacks. I do an ambush, 1, 2, ambush, 1, 2, weapon swap ambush, 1, 2, I'll do my thing over here, ambush, 1, 2, this one picks up it automatically, 1, 2, I'll throw down some mirrors, do a dodge, 1, 2, I'll pick up another one, 1, 2, weapon swap, 1, 2, you know, I'm kind of just throwing that together because obviously I'm in the middle of some random stuff here. But you do need to make sure to space those out. If you don't space them out well enough, these guys are not attacking and you're losing damage, which is also vitally important when it comes to anytime you're generating clones in general. If you don't space these suckers out, there's currently a bug which makes it so that these guys will disappear if they're interrupted too much when they first spawn, right? So if I make a guy right here and I ambush and then I ambush again, he just disappears because of a weird bug where I think it has to do with Chrono's precasting clones in the past. LuxRoy has done a lot of diving into this bug itself, and of course it should be known by now thanks to her hard work there. But these guys will not they will not be allowed to be pre-stacked anymore for chronos on like Sloth or QTP. If they don't attack a target within like the first 3 or 4 seconds that they appear, they will disappear, which means if I do an F2 shatter into my combo and then I do lots of dodges, these guys are going to disappear on me. There, I just lost a clone. I just lost 2 clones. What's happening? It's a disaster, right? So I can't stress it enough. Make sure you are spacing out 1-2 auto attacks between every single ambush, and this should never happen to you because they will attack the boss and they won't disappear for no good reason. So that's something to keep in mind. And I think that's the bulk of this. Like I said, the vast majority of this is managing your resources. If you want to do good damage on this class, it is a simple matter of making sure that you use every single mirror and you never let your endurance overcap. That's easier said than done because you have a lot of mirrors, you have a lot of dodges and stuff like that, but it is something to keep in mind. If you have 2 Staff Mirages on your team, you do not need to go concentration food, right? So I can switch from concentration to meat flatbreads. I don't need to use toxic. If there is a druid in your group, you can tell them to drop Grace of the Land, because if you are DPSing, if you are ambushing, you are naturally producing might with your chaos. And these all really help to open up comps and how we can play this game. Me and my static, we like to take Herald now. We drop the druid, take a Herald. You're losing Frost Period by doing that. You can take a Soul Beast, which might work a little bit better since the new release, the new buff on Soul Beast. So this opens up a lot of freedom since we don't need might from the druid. Tempest is also a good option, and Herald and Tempest are really good at providing fury and protection and swiftness, which we can't do. But the druid used to do, right? So those are good options to combine with the Staff Mirage. This is an incredibly powerful class on any fight that has confusion. Unfortunately, we do more confusion than Kandi Chrono, which is the confusion class. We can easily keep 40 plus confusion stacks on the boss. So Soulless Horror, Largos, any class with really fast attacks are really good, as well as a ton of Torment, right? So we're still very powerful on classes that stay still as well, like Sabir and Karn and Emo and stuff like that. This guy can be brought pretty much everywhere. So if anyone has any other questions about anything I've explained, one thing I want to point out real quick, a small bug that affects us more specifically, is that regeneration does not work if you apply it to yourself in the golem area. It will work if you apply all boons, but if you apply all boons, you can't test your alacrity uptime, right? So you need to make sure that you have a regen source outside of the golem itself, because if I go to this myself and I keep alacrity off of me because I want to test how good I'm keeping alac up, and I go to this sucker and I add boons and I'm like, I need regen because chaos has important things with regen. So I put that sucker on, and I have my outside source of regen go away, and I look over here. I'm at 8% boon duration. This is bad. Where's my free 16%? It's gone. So you need an outside source of regen if you want to test your alac. I have a lovely Herald standing here just pulsing out regen, because Heralds can do that forever for free. So if you have a Herald friend, you can throw them next to you. Unfortunately, if you don't have an outside source of regen, there's really no way to test your alac yourself unless you want to somehow. There, now I have all the boon duration because she was kind enough to give me regen. So now I'm up to 23, and that's without toxic. If you don't have an outside source of regen, it's very difficult to test your alacrity uptime, so keep that in mind. If you're just testing your DPS, you can give yourself all boons, and the golem's regen will work then. So feel free to just use all boons instead of regen. I have a question. You guys can feel free to DM me if you have any questions and you don't want to talk. You recommend Alacren for most bosses, or are especially Alacren for power fights. So at this point, I think Staff Mirage is better than Divren on almost every single fight, personally. The few examples where it doesn't work are examples of pure power fights, like Adina, except for Devastation Ren because they're OP. KC is another good one. I don't think it's very good on Gorseval either, because you need a druid kind of for Entangle in a way, and it just doesn't have enough damage to pump out a lot of damage, and Gorseval himself attacks too slow. but it works just fine on VG. You can help do red. It works just fine on Sabbatha, but you do have to keep in mind that when she's doing a flame wall, she's not attacking, different things like that. It works on almost everything except for power exclusive fights. And I think it is definitely better than Divren. And I think it's kind of better than RR as well, especially on fights with high confusion. On fights with lower confusion, you could probably bring in RRs and would be inconsequential. They'd probably do both just about as good. RR is still very powerful with the Torment buff. But definitely better than Divren in my opinion on most fights. What do you reckon the DPS bench is now after the nerf? Well, the problem is we don't auto attack much, right? So I think, what was the last bench? I think someone managed to hit 30k. I think 29 is the more accurate one, in my opinion, except for the staff 5ing. I would say that a good top bench would probably be 28, 27 maybe, but the DPS nerf was not at all consequential for us in general, because like I've been showing, we have so many ambushes, and whenever we're ambushing, the nerf doesn't affect us. It only affects when our clones are auto-attacking, and since they are 1 slower than us, and since they are 2 almost always ambushing anyway, it pretty much doesn't touch us. So I wouldn't expect to see a huge nerf in our bench. What's the opinion on endurance regen food? Endurance regen food isn't bad. The problem with endurance regen food is once you get really good at using your mirrors off cooldown, you just already have so many ambushes already that there's a very, very good chance that you're going to overcap on endurance, which makes it almost useless, right? And I could have just taken more expertise instead for more damage, so why bother? So right now, like between using this, and I have this, and I have another one of these, now I got a bunch of mirrors I have to pick up. It's very, very easy to overcap on endurance with endurance food. So I don't think it is the proper option. I think you should just use concentration food and utilities if you need it and call it a day. But in my opinion, it is not the way to go. I would definitely go with concentration food instead. And if you don't feel like you need the concentration food, then you can go back to the standard veggie bread, or in this case meat bread, since I switched to what I need for expertise. Anyone else have any other questions? Feel free to DM me if you want to ask me a question, or
sort of general Mesmer question. Just, is Signet of Ether currently bugged for people?
Yes, Signet of Ether is currently only working on the lowest phantasmal cooldown.
I would just like to add
That's
real quick
no
that
longer true.
They fixed
the
it?
update that you saw was just that.
Okay.
Yeah, they just fixed it.
Awesome. So we hotfixed that. It's not a worry. It should be works. If I do it right now, it's still going to bug for me because I haven't updated. But just update your game and it should be irrelevant. Thank you. Appreciate you guys jumping in on that. Either way, that's irrelevant to us because we don't take it. Phantasmal Warlock is bad. But yeah, keep in mind that was fixed. So we're good to go there. Arc DPS is also updated. Fun fact for anyone out there who hasn't updated it yet. Right now, it is majorly screwy if you haven't updated it. My benches were either showing like 9k or 50k. It was really, really wild. So feel free to update that as well. Any other questions?
What's the name of your YouTube channel?
I guess I can plug. Feels weird, man. I don't even know my own channel, I'm not gonna lie to you. So here it is. That's a lot of stuff. Can I just like put the name in? What is it's Abyss. Like it's literally just Abyss, but I don't think you could find that, right? So I'll plug that in training pings. Where is it?
Cool. Thanks. I'll make sure to like and subscribe.
Thank you. Training ping discussion. It's there now if you want to go to it. Feel free. I will also put in my Discord and can go from there as well because my actually I don't want to plug my Discord in RA, so but it's there if you guys want to see it. I will probably upload this soon and we will pin it into Mesmer chat so you guys can check that anytime. I have one there right now, but that is now out of date. So I will replace that one with this one. Any other questions? Oh, with full Viper gear, energy bursting sigil, expertise infusion, when does boon duration come from? Food? Yeah. If you want more boon duration at this point, I would suggest using food and utility, which in this case would be toxic maintenance oil and eggs Benedict, which I have in my guild storage. I have spiced eggs Benedict. Any kind of eggs Benedict work. They're all concentration expertise. So those should be enough to get you that extra 16% that we lost with the nerf today. If you need extra, you can use a concentration sigil, but I don't think you really need it at this point.
If I was to run this without infusions, is there a superior setup aside from obviously swapping to expertise main stat to make up some content, some expertise?
If you want to be a tryhard but you don't want to use infusions, one thing that we did figure out was you could use a, what is it? The neck piece. You can use a. Forgot the name. It starts with an S. Sinister necklace, and you can use a malice sigil instead of a bursting sigil. And between the sinister and the malice, it'll get you up to like 99.8% Condi duration without infusions. So that is an option. Alternatively, you can just sit at 95%. It shouldn't be too big of a deal. But yeah, that's an option. Malice with sinister neck would also work.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. If that's all, I hope you guys enjoyed this open session. I will probably do more of these in the future depending on how this class gets buffed and nerfed. So if you enjoyed this, feel free to keep an eye out for more in the future as this class continues to get buffed and nerfed. If you have any feedback for anything I could have done better with this, this was kind of just an on-the-fly thing. Feel free to post it in the feedback form that is in announcements in the server. It's up at the top there in announcements chat. If you appreciate it, just feel free to throw appreciation in the Discord chat. You don't have to worry about using the feedback form. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully I'll see you guys in the future and I'll see more Staff Mirages out there in the field. You guys have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
No problem.